Nathan asked, what are your thoughts on Deion Sanders' comments on the Rich Eisen show about wanting linemen who grew up in single-parent households and quarterbacks who grew up in two-parent homes from Jerusalem, Israel? I told you we had an international audience, so I got to pull out the old trusty laptop for this. I had producer Jesse send me these exact quotes. These are Deion's words, not mine. I think a lot of you heard this. For the few of you who didn't, listen to this eye-opener. 3 quotes here. Different positions are different, Deion says. Offensive linemen, I look for guys from dual-parent homes. A strong father they adhere to. Smart kid, at least 3.3 GPA and above, tough and physical. That's not controversial. He continued. Defensive line, totally opposite. I want kids from a single-parent household, single mama, trying to get it. He's on free lunch. I'm talking about just trying to make it. He's trying to rescue mama. Like mama barely made the flight, and I just want him to go get it. It's a whole different set of attributes you look for in different positions, and we have that stuff just chronicled. We know what we want, and we go get it. 3rd quote, quarterbacks are different. We want a mother, a father, two-parent household. We want that kid to be at least a 3.5 GPA because he has to be smart. Not bad decisions off the field at all. He has to be a leader of men, and so many different attributes in what we look for when we see a quarterback are there. What do you think about that? Now, there was a group of people who recoiled at this. I saw the reaction the other day. I waited. Candidly, I waited to react to this because I wanted to see what the reaction was from other corners of our industry. Now, it was sharply divided, as I imagined it would be. And on one side were people who understand how sports work. And I'm not saying everyone who's never played was on the other side of the fence, but the folks I saw pushing back on this and saying this is a problem, you can have that opinion. What I noticed is a majority of them did not have a full working knowledge of how recruiting works and how decisions are made. So let me tell you, what Deion said there is not revolutionary. It's only revolutionary in one sense, and that's he said it publicly. Because this has been a going philosophy for a long time for several coaching staffs, several major high-profile programs and head coaches, and it's not hard and fast, by the way. There are exceptions to every rule. It's not like if you look at the next Joe Montana, for example, or in a more modern sense, if you see the next Trevor Lawrence, but he only has one parent in the household, Deion Sanders is not going to pass up offering him a scholarship. That's not what he's saying. He's saying we have fairly strict parameters, and then we always have room for a manual override. But he's saying by and large, because of the qualities we want at this position, and because by and large, the kind of person that this kind of environment provides fits these parameters, that's how we're going to set our criteria. And I have heard this for a long time about recruiting defensive linemen. You want people who carry themselves a certain way off the field, but when you get them on the field, they gotta have a little different something in them. And there are all kind of adjectives you can use. Coaches, especially when you get them off the record, will not hold back in using those adjectives. You got to have a different mentality to play defensive line, to be an edge rusher, and to really maximize impact on a game, to really fully bring out your God-given ability on a football field. It's a violent sport. You got to have a violent mentality to play that position. You don't have to have a violent mentality to be a receiver. I'd love for you to have one, especially when it comes to fighting for 50-50 balls, especially when it comes to being able to stalk block and help me in the run game. I'd love for you to have it, but you don't have to have it. You don't have to have a violent mentality to be a quarterback. I need you to be cerebral. Like Deion said, I need you to be a good decision maker. You need to have poise. I need you to have accuracy. I need other people to look at you and want to follow you. You got to have leadership characteristics. But you don't have to be a violent person, or you don't have to have a violent mentality necessarily. Defensive line, you do. There are no soft defensive linemen. They get weeded out pretty quickly. And I've talked about this in another context on previous shows that have nothing to do with football. Like I told you, I am a big believer that there is this swath of the American youth right now, and has been for a while, that came up in a two-parent household. They weren't rich, they weren't poor, they were just tweeners that don't have that defensive lineman dog in them, and they may not even play sports. They're not hardened, they're not soft. They didn't grow up needing for anything, but they also didn't grow up with everything handed to them, and they just kind of float around for a little while. They don't have their backs against the wall from birth, but they also aren't born on third base. And I grew up like that. Now, on the economic scale, we were probably a little bit lower than we were higher. I wouldn't exactly call us middle class, but I grew up with two loving parents. And so I did not grow up thinking the world was out to get me. I didn't grow up thinking I am my family's only shot. I didn't grow up knowing I had to raise my loved ones out of abject poverty. I didn't have that kind of fire in me. My motivation comes from other places, but I didn't have that in me. But I had friends who did. And I played sports with them. And you, if you've ever played, if you've ever been in a locker room, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You know the guys who didn't have it easy, didn't have it as ready-made for them growing up. Maybe didn't have a dad. Maybe didn't have a mom. Maybe grew up in foster care. It is a touchy subject. It's tough because a lot of truth has been deemed controversial lately. And this right here is just truth. Your reality is your reality. If you're growing up in a single-parent household, it's not your fault. But at the same time, it's not a coach's fault. It's not a teammate's fault. It just is. It just is what it is. If it's raining outside, it's no one's fault. It's just raining. So you can either open an umbrella or get soaked. And if you're growing up in that situation, or if you're having to recruit kids, you can either acknowledge the obvious. These are the needs I have for my defensive lineman, and that's the group of kids who tends to have those characteristics, or you can get run over. You can have a lot of nice kids who get planted on third down, because there's going to come a time where the other team needs 2 yards to move the chains and milk the clock away, and you got to have guys that prevent them from getting those 2 yards. What kind of kid do you think is more likely to prevent it? That's what Deion Sanders is saying. It's not controversial. It's uncomfortable. It's not controversial. There are a lot of things that are uncomfortable that aren't necessarily controversial or shouldn't be. So when I heard it, I knew 2 things. I knew, number one, he's not saying anything different than a lot of coaches think. And number 2, oh boy, he said it. He actually said, wow. Deion Sanders just has the leeway to say that sort of thing. I'm not sure I would have done that segment unprovoked, unasked. But now we had an excuse to, so we did it. Thanks for watching, guys. Don't leave yet. Don't leave yet. Make sure you like the video and please subscribe to the channel. Not just for me, that's how we keep this entire thing free.